The new security scanner flashed a bright red light the second I held my employee badge against it. I frowned, stepped back, and tried again, thinking the reader had glitched. The same warning appeared on the screen: access denied. Before I could process what was happening, I became painfully aware that the entire lobby had gone silent. Coworkers who usually rushed toward the elevator slowed down just enough to watch. A receptionist looked away awkwardly, pretending to organize paperwork she had already arranged. I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined my own boss had planned this moment as a public performance. Then the glass conference room door opened, and my supervisor, Daniel Mercer, walked toward me with the kind of smile that only appeared when someone else was about to suffer. He folded his arms confidently and stopped just a few feet away, making sure everyone nearby could hear every word. He casually announced that the office security system had been updated over the weekend and that my credentials were no longer valid because the company had decided to move in a different direction. He spoke so calmly that it almost sounded rehearsed. Several department managers forced nervous laughs, eager to stay on his good side, while everyone else stood frozen, unsure whether they should feel embarrassed for me or afraid they might be next. I tightened my grip on the small cardboard box I had carried from my car that morning. Inside were framed pictures of my parents, a coffee mug my younger sister had given me for my birthday, and a notebook filled with years of ideas for projects that had helped grow the business. Daniel looked directly at the box before extending his hand toward my company laptop. He calmly instructed me to hand it over because human resources would take care of everything else. His expression made it obvious that he expected tears, an argument, or at least some desperate attempt to defend myself. Instead, I smiled politely and asked if he was absolutely certain the company no longer needed me. He laughed confidently and replied that the new digital manager could easily handle my little website. That single sentence told me everything I needed to know. Daniel believed I spent my days updating a few web pages. He had no idea what I actually managed behind the scenes. My name is Natalie Parker, and for nearly 9 years I quietly built the digital foundation of Harrison Solutions, one of the fastest growing consulting companies in our state. Most employees believed I worked somewhere in the information technology department because they only saw me fixing website issues or attending technical meetings. The truth was far more complicated. I served as director of digital operations, which meant nearly every online system the company depended on passed through me in one way or another. Customer accounts, online scheduling, hosting services, cloud backups, search rankings, security certificates, payment processing, analytics, vendor integrations, and dozens of automated systems all depended on work that happened quietly behind the scenes. When everything functioned perfectly, nobody noticed I existed. When something failed, everyone called me. Daniel loved taking credit whenever our company celebrated another successful quarter. During investor meetings, he proudly described the digital strategy as if he had personally designed every system. Whenever someone praised the smooth customer experience, he smiled confidently and accepted every compliment without mentioning my name once. I convinced myself that recognition did not matter because I genuinely enjoyed solving complicated problems. I believed hard work would eventually speak for itself. Looking back now, I realize I confused loyalty with silence, and that mistake nearly cost me everything. The beginning of the end arrived when Daniel hired his longtime golfing partner's son, Ethan Collins. He was 27 years old, charming, confident, and completely unqualified for the position he received. During his first team meeting, Daniel introduced him as the future leader of our digital department and announced that Ethan would eventually oversee every online project. Most people applauded politely, assuming he must have impressive experience. Within days, I realized he barely understood the difference between website design and server administration. He repeated buzzwords he had memorized from business podcasts and often interrupted meetings to explain concepts he clearly did not understand. Daniel, however, treated every confusing sentence as if it were a brilliant insight. Over the following weeks, my responsibilities quietly disappeared one by one. Meetings I had always led suddenly appeared on Ethan's calendar instead. Clients who normally contacted me were instructed to communicate with him first. Daniel insisted I document every procedure, every password policy, every maintenance schedule, and every emergency recovery plan so the department would have better organization. Ethan sat beside me pretending to learn while constantly checking his phone or scrolling through social media. He frequently interrupted my explanations by insisting he already understood everything, only to ask me the exact same questions a few minutes later. It slowly became obvious that I was not preparing the department for growth. I was training the person Daniel intended to replace me with. Everything became painfully clear one evening when I stayed late to finish preparing reports for the quarterly board meeting. As I walked past Daniel's office, I heard my own name through the partially closed door. He was laughing with another executive while explaining that once Natalie finished teaching Ethan everything, we can eliminate her position and save a fortune on payroll. The words hit me harder than I expected. 9 years of loyalty had been reduced to an expensive salary that could be replaced by someone cheaper and easier to control. I quietly walked away before anyone noticed I had overheard them. That night, instead of crying, I updated my resume for the first time in nearly a decade. I was not planning to resign. I simply refused to be caught unprepared when the betrayal finally arrived. The following Monday morning, Daniel made sure it arrived in the most humiliating way possible. I walked out of the building carrying nothing except my cardboard box and the quiet satisfaction that Daniel had underestimated me. I never raised my voice, argued with human resources, or begged for another chance because there was no point. Anyone willing to lock an employee out before even delivering termination papers had already decided the outcome. During the drive home, I kept replaying his final words about my little website, and every mile made me realize just how little he understood about the business he claimed to lead. He thought collecting my laptop and disabling my badge meant he had taken away my ability to help the company. What he forgot was that my administrator credentials were connected to secure cloud systems, not the physical computer sitting in his office. The moment I arrived home, I opened my personal laptop and signed into the encrypted password manager I had created years earlier with the company's approval. Every administrator permission was still active because Daniel had never bothered to understand how our digital infrastructure actually worked. I could see the hosting account, payment gateway, cloud backups, domain management, customer portal, and every monitoring dashboard exactly as I had the day before. I did not change a single setting because I knew that would cross both legal and ethical lines. Instead, I immediately called my attorney, Rebecca Foster, explained everything that had happened, and carefully documented every active permission with screenshots and detailed notes. Rebecca reminded me that I had every right to protect myself, but she warned me not to interfere with company operations in any way. I promised her I would not touch anything that belonged to Harrison Solutions. The next morning, my phone started ringing before sunrise. The first call came from Ethan, followed by Daniel less than 5 minutes later. I ignored both. Within an hour, my voicemail was overflowing with increasingly desperate messages asking me to call back immediately because the company website had stopped processing customer orders. I calmly logged into the monitoring dashboard and quickly understood what had happened. Nothing had been hacked, deleted, or sabotaged. The corporate credit card linked to the hosting provider had expired overnight, and several automated renewal notices had been emailed directly to Daniel over the previous month. Since I was no longer checking company systems, no one else had noticed the warnings. As a result, online payments had been suspended automatically, customers could not complete purchases, and support requests were flooding the office. The crisis existed because the only person who had always caught these issues before they became emergencies was no longer employed. By that afternoon, Daniel finally sent an email instead of another demand. For the first time in years, his confidence had disappeared. He admitted the company was losing thousands of dollars every hour and asked if I would consider helping restore operations. I forwarded the message to Rebecca instead of replying directly. She contacted Daniel's attorney and made one thing perfectly clear. I was no longer an employee, and if Harrison Solutions wanted my expertise, they would have to hire me as an independent consultant under a legally binding agreement. Daniel initially refused, insisting the price was unreasonable, but his attitude changed dramatically after 3 more days of lost sales, angry customers, and a major client threatening to cancel a multi-million-dollar contract unless the online systems were restored immediately. When we finally met in a neutral conference room, Daniel looked exhausted. The man who had publicly embarrassed me only a few days earlier could barely maintain eye contact. Rebecca placed the consulting agreement on the table and calmly explained every condition. Payment would be made in advance. My responsibilities would be limited to restoring digital operations, and there would be no obligation to return as an employee. Daniel signed every page without arguing because he no longer had another option. The next morning, I walked back into the same office where I had been humiliated. Employees who had silently watched my termination now greeted me with genuine respect. Even Ethan apologized, admitting he had known Daniel planned to replace me but had been too afraid to speak up. I accepted his apology because the real lesson belonged to Daniel, not him. Restoring the entire system took less than 2 hours. I updated the payment information, renewed the expired security certificates, processed pending software licenses, verified database integrity, and confirmed every automated service was functioning normally again. Almost immediately, customer orders resumed, support tickets slowed, and the sales team celebrated as revenue started flowing again. Daniel approached me with an awkward smile and even offered me my old position back, pretending the previous week had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. I thanked him for the offer but declined without hesitation. I had already learned exactly how much loyalty was worth inside his company, and I had no intention of giving him another opportunity to disrespect me. Within weeks, several former Harrison Solutions clients contacted me directly after learning I was available for independent consulting. Word spread quickly throughout the industry that I had been the person responsible for building the company's digital success all along. Before long, I launched my own digital consulting firm, hired talented people who were treated with fairness and respect, and built a workplace where no employee would ever fear being discarded after years of dedication. About 6 months later, I crossed paths with Daniel at a business conference. He quietly admitted he had made a terrible mistake and confessed that he never realized how much I actually contributed. I simply smiled and told him that he had not made a mistake, he had made a choice. Changing the office locks was supposed to keep me out forever, but instead it opened the door to the best opportunity of my career. The greatest revenge was never watching his company struggle. It was proving that my value had never depended on his approval, and building a future where no one could ever lock me out of my own success again.